Okay. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Brent Nickel, and I'll be helping to moderate the Lunch and Learn today, as well as keep an eye on the chat throughout the presentation. And thank you all again for joining today. Thank you to our presenter today, which is Charlie Schafer, the president and owner of Agri Drain Corporation, which manufactures products for use in conservation practices that conserve water, improve water quality and wildlife habitat, and minimize soil erosion and nutrient loss. So really, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Charlie and let him get started. And again, I'll be monitoring the chat for questions throughout the presentation, and feel free to come off mute throughout his presentation to ask questions. Charlie would like to keep this pretty interactive. So Charlie, if you're ready to go, I'll let you get started.
Great, thanks very much, Brent. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you great.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking time. Spring's always busy season for all of us, but appreciate you jumping on. Lisa Newby is here with me as well. Lisa manages our sales and marketing and corporate communications here at Agri Drain Corp. And so she's going to help with the technical side and created the PowerPoint presentation. Brent attended at least part of the Conservation Drainage Network meeting that we had what was it, 6 weeks ago, I guess, probably in Fort Wayne. And it was a nice event. And so I gave a modified version of this presentation there. And so he asked me if I could share it with you as well at your Lunch and Learn. So we're happy to do that. Appreciate it. It will be available to you if you want it. And also some of the images that we have here, if they'd be helpful. Lisa can carve them out and furnish them too. And Brent said he'd be kind enough to share her contact information with the group. And so we're happy to run those images out and let people use them. Sometimes it's easier with a picture to tell a story. So we titled this Drainage Water Management. This was part of a panel discussion that we had. Keegan Cult with ADMC moderated, and Tom Christensen was on, and a variety of others. And so we kind of told a little bit of the history of where we're at, where we're heading with this drainage water management. And I've added some images here, or at least I've actually added some images here that will help kind of describe the practice and what it does. So some more questions than answers, because at the end of this thing, we'll think about where we go from here. So advance the Ag Drainage Management System Task Force was created to help develop a real adoption, to help promote the adoption of drainage water management as a standalone practice, but also in conjunction with edge of field practices like saturated buffers and bioreactors, nitrogen treatment wetlands, things like that. So they are primarily, were initially Landgrant University folks. They were EPA, NRCS. There were some nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy and the Fertilizer Institute, some of those people who really had a vested interest in helping to promote water quality and also still maintain good productive ag working lands. So that was their deal. And then if you go to the next screen, it happened that they were just 20 years old at this time. And so we talked about some of the things they've done. They worked directly with the Ag Drainage Management Coalition, as I mentioned, and the Ag Research Service is represented there as well, and CSREES. So it's a bunch of great people who do a wonderful job of studying and researching and interacting with the ag communities, with ag retail and producers. And so we've been fortunate enough initially to be participants. We couldn't be actually members because we were private industry kind of guys, and they were a quasi-governmental organization. And after FPAC was formed, their structure changed and their funding source changed. And so now we actually are members of the group, and we call it the Conservation Drainage Network. So if anybody has drainage related questions, it's kind of the who's who of the whole research side of it. We've gained a lot. The industry's gained a lot by being associated with them and learning from them. So next slide. The really big motivator to get the discussion started, and the reason the group initially met was EPA was looking at hypoxia. We've all seen either this image or images like it. And that was the big deal. We thought about hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico. What do we do about this? How do we address it before it gets worse, or even try to minimize it as much as we could? And so EPA really drew a target on agriculture and oftentimes specifically on ag drainage. And so if you do the next, we consider kind of be the canary in the coal mine. This is the one thing that we always looked at annually. That Dr. Nancy Ravlis would bring out the size of the shape of the dead zone, the hypoxia zone, and then we'd kind of wait and see it, and then we'd all think about, well, why is it larger or smaller? Is it about rainfall and timing and rates and about different farming practices and things, and so the big emphasis was, okay, how do we take a responsible position as ag producers, ag industry, and specifically in the land improvement and drainage industry? What can we do to help minimize the impact and still maintain, real high production? So the one thing that kind of came out of this discussion early on was the golden rule of drainage. Dr. Wayne Skaggs, some of you may know Dr. Skaggs and Dr. Robert Evans at North Carolina State University would always say, hey, only drain the water that's necessary for production. You don't want to have compaction. You want to let that soil warm. I think everybody pretty much knows the value and benefits of drainage, but what we didn't always think about was that about half of the water that leaves a systematically drained field over the course of a year is drained or removed during the fallow season. You don't really need drainage. And so then we begin to think about, well, why wouldn't we take a proactive approach to this and make these drains smarter and more responsive to environmental concerns, and also maintain additional water and nutrients for healthy crop production. And so that's kind of from this, that's the direction that the industry has grown, and tried to put in some controls and management. If you think about it, gosh, it's been what, 160 years, I think, that started in New York State, subsurface drainage in this country. And we started off manually, and we went to some form of mechanization and some equipment that we could put in larger drains and more rapidly. We drained the Des Moines Lobe, for instance, is 10 million acres. Huge project of both surface ditches, subsurface mains, submains and laterals. But again, you see the outlet on the right side still flows 24/7 whenever there's water available. And so then we continued to improve and upgrade the equipment that we had to install this stuff. We did a better, longer life product. So we went away from old baked clay tile and concrete tile that sometimes misaligned. They allowed dirt to get in them. They'd break. The frost could heave them and move them around. But so we improved the material that went in, but still the outlet ran 24/7, gravity flow. And so we worked on grade control, make them installed more accurately. We were actually drainage contractors from 1976 to 84. And that looks like a machine we had. We had the laser alignment dual grade 3000 and a Holland Drain FSS. That was great fun, to go out and install this stuff. But we never really thought about the water quality issues associated with subsurface drainage, or even the fact that we may be removing more water than is beneficial to the crops at certain times of the year. So 24/7 gravity flow. So easy to think about what we've done here: faster, easier, cheaper, longer useful life, more intensive, no smarter. 24/7 gravity flow doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so from that, we got, the industry got the idea that it's pretty easy for us to manage water levels and flow rates. And, we've developed a really efficient system here for ag production in the use of subsurface drainage, but we forgot to put a switch on it. We forgot to figure out how we could manage this stuff so it's better yet. You wouldn't make a light bulb and not put a switch on it. You wouldn't have an air conditioning unit or a furnace that you couldn't turn on or off, or even have some type of a thermostat you could adjust, like a rheostat on a light, to turn it up, turn it down. We thought, why don't we do the same thing with subsurface drainage systems? So with that, Agri manufactures a whole lot of products that are used in and associated with subsurface drainage systems and surface water management and all these things. But we've really spent a lot of time recently thinking more and more about how do we manage the water levels and flow rates in that subsurface drainage system. Again, it's all about maximizing the environmental outcomes, or at least minimizing the negative impact, and also increasing yield, make it a profitable venture for the ag producer in order to provide incentives for them as well. And initially, 30 years ago plus, 35 years ago, Lisa, right? Yeah. We started to build these water level control structures, a couple different types, inlet and inline. So they'd either take water directly into the structure from surface water, or you could hook it directly to an underground conduit or pipe and add and subtract stop logs for raising over the water level. They do a great job. We build this product today in a variety of configurations and versions. And so they're a long life, affordable product that's really durable. And so they work well, but they're still manual. And some of you may know Norm Fauzi. Norm was with Agri Research Service, just I think south of you, Brent, out of the Columbus station. Worked there, and great guys, very much involved in drainage from the production standpoint and the water quality side. And so this is a picture I just love of the Norm out there actually adjusting the elevation of a water level control structure. But if a producer has one of these, that's fine. They might go out and adjust it half a dozen times a year. Probably not going to be as aggressive, not provide active management like you would with automation. And if they have a lot of these units scattered around, if a producer, let's say he's got 50 of them in fields that are 25 miles away, it's not a practical approach to do it manually. And everything else we work with today, certainly in agriculture and other industries, is automated. And so what we've done here at Agri Drain is look at how can we develop cellular-based automatic water level control structures that we can program to open and close on demand, and also then couple it up in times of water deficit with sub-irrigation systems. Because with a sub-irrigation system, all you really do is kind of reverse that drainage process by adding water back into the system and allow water to flow back out away from the tile and provide supplemental irrigation to crops during times of scarcity or drought. We also did some things like making the lower right hand corner a water gate. Now this is a fully buried automatic water control device that is float operated. And so if you elevate the water on the downstream side a minimum of 12 inches, then you'll provide enough buoyancy with those floats that they'll raise up in the body of the structure, and they'll apply pressure to the upstream orifice to hold water back. And so they're designed to add an additional 12 inches of water on the upstream side over the water level on the downstream side. So with these devices, we can stair step water up to the soil profile. We can make it less expensive. They are automated, and we can be more creative in our design of the system, because farmers hate to farm around stuff. And when these are buried, it doesn't matter where they're located. They can be in the traffic pattern in the field, and we can do mains and sub-mains with these things, make them up to 12-inch diameter. So it gives us a lot of flexibility and holds costs down in the systems as well. So next slide, please. So if you think about in its simplest form, what you would do, certainly if it was a manual structure, is open the device up, pull stop logs in the spring, allow water to drain down as it would with a traditional subsurface drainage system. In the wintertime, you would want to hold back as much water as you could. Now, NRCS provides financial assistance for both the design of these systems and also for the installation of the equipment. But they require that you hold water back during the fallow period to reduce nutrient loss. So in the wintertime, you'd hold it up with about 1 foot of field elevation. In summertime, you would, depending on the depth of your drainage system, oftentimes people will elevate the water level just enough to store some water and nutrients for the crop use. This would be if there's no sub-irrigation system. And of course, in the fall, you want to drain back down again. Spring and fall, you want to drain down so you've got access to the field. And again, you get all the benefits of the normal drainage system. So that'd be a simplified seasonal schedule for the drainage water management. If we get a little bit more creative with our multi-level, fully automated system, you can pretty much pick whatever elevation you want for your water level during the growing season and the fallow season. That allows you a tremendous amount of flexibility and the greatest opportunity to get all the benefits that these systems can provide, even up to raising water level above field elevation if there's an interest in migratory waterfowl habitat, that type of thing. So gives you a lot of flexibility because it basically opens and closes on demand based on whatever set points you establish for that particular time of year. We have a little video here of the automated system, the smart drainage system, that'll give you an idea of what we're doing with these things. In addition to just establishing the optimum water level in the soil profile, which we call a set point, we also can build into this program the ability to allow water to raise above that set point for a given period of time. And so what that does is when we can show the video here that might help explain it. This is courtesy of ADS, and we partnered with them on this video. See the laterals flowing down to the main. And so water's collected in the field. And there's an animation here that will show where that water that's collected in the laterals flows to the main and rises up into the structure. You can see where the set point has been established, and now that water raises up above the set point, because when all that water seeps into those collector laterals and flows to the main, this is the type of situation you'll create to where at the lowest point where this structure is installed, the water level will bounce up, depends on the topography and the drainage system design. But our thoughts are, why wouldn't we want to allow that water to stay in the soil profile for a while and kind of normalize and level back out? And then we can actually store more water and more nutrients than would otherwise be available if you just had, for instance, you can play that again, Lisa. I think it's cool. If you just had a stop log set on the top level, that water that popped up above that set point, which would be your top stop log, would immediately run out of the field. So again, laterals flow to the main, main flowing to the water level control structure down by the outlet, and water flowing into the structure, popping up above the ideal set point. You know, depending on the crop and the maturity of the crop, you can store water for a period of time, a number of hours, let's say 48, 72 hours before you do any damage. You see how the valve on the bottom opens up then and drains that water down and holds it back to that set point. And then we start over again. We look at the timer. We have actually 4 timers built into this, so we can establish set points, as many as we want. You can do one a day if you like. And then 4 set points above it. You may say 6 inches above, 12 inches above, 18 inches above, 24 inches above the set point. And you may say, I'll do it for 40 hours, 30 hours, 20 hours, and 10 hours. But if the water stays that high for that period of time, I want to drain down. I want to protect the crop because that is my number one goal. So this type of a system, just with manual systems, has produced some pretty impressive results. We talked about crop yield, corn and beans. That's cool. This was done in North Carolina. And then for nutrient loss, so the nitrate loss. It also performs about as well for phosphorus, in some cases more. And typically you think about phosphorus attached to soil particles, but we're talking about phosphorus in solution, orthophosphate. And when we can hold it in the soil profile and allow that water to, number one, transport less water over the course of the year, but also allow those nutrients to move back into the soil profile, we get really good benefits from that as well. So when we think about the importance of this, and we think about how do we apply this system to a farm field. It's fine to have widgets and it's fine to have operating systems and all that jazz, but unless you can actually design the system so it's set up correctly, then it's really difficult to make a real measurable and meaningful difference. So if you think about a farm field that is truly flat as a pancake, then it doesn't really matter how you design the system. Because if for instance, you had 40 acres flat as a table and you put in a main and some laterals, and you put a water level control structure at the downstream end of that main, then you're going to uniformly raise water up into the soil profile at whatever level you either set your stop logs or determine your set point to be for that particular type of crop and time of year. So that's simple, but most fields aren't as flat as pancakes. Even if they appear to be really flat, most of them have a bit of slope built into them. And as we survey that, even if it's a tenth or two, it still makes a difference. And so with a field like this, you have to think a lot about the design system. It's not brain surgery, but it also, at least it has to be designed and installed correctly. So if you think about, if you just put the main to run along the bottom of the field, the bottom of the slope, and you put the laterals to run up the slope, and you put in a water level control structure, then you're only going to manage a small portion of that field, because everything else will run out over the top because of the elevation of the field and the elevation of the water above the main. So you can think about a design that's more creative and more efficient from a water management standpoint, and put the main up the slope and put the laterals on the contour as far and as flat as you can, maybe even a tenth of a foot. Some people go a half a tenth of a foot per 100 feet. So they put them really flat and run them out the contour and curve them around. And then you can put in another water level control structure at 1 or 2 foot intervals and another water level control structure. And then you create zones of influence. And those zones will be managed individually. You can also put water in from the top of the system if you want to sub-irrigate, and it gives you an opportunity to manage much more water. Instead of using those manual structures, you could use water gates there as well. So winds up being a more sophisticated design, but certainly a more functional design from a management standpoint. A lot of these systems are being replaced now that were installed, or they were installed more as a random drain and more targeted for individual problem points, and a lot of them based on the return on investment. Farmers have come back and install these things, and if we miss the opportunity to design and install them correctly, then they're not manageable, and so that's unfortunate. So we think about how important this is, and think about corn and beans. This was a 55 to 62 year study, I think, something like that, of corn and beans, and it showed based on yield loss associated with conditions that are too wet or too dry. It showed over half the yield loss with a combination of those two issues. Half the yield loss in beans and over 2/3 of the yield loss in corn were directly related to too wet or too dry. And man, that's a tremendous amount of lost opportunity. And that's why people consider drainage and they look at sub-irrigation. When I first saw this chart, I thought, man, we have to be solving this problem with better hybrids, precision planting, all our fertilizer application. So I went to Jerry Hatfield. Some of you guys may know Jerry Hatfield. He ran the National Lab for Ag and the Environment, originally the National Soil Tilt Lab in Ames, Iowa. Jerry's a great guy. He's talking to that guy on the left, and maybe you recognize as Secretary Vilsack. And Jerry really gets it. He's truly outstanding in his field. They both are. But I called Jerry and I said, Jerry, this has got to be getting better, right? This is old data, happened a long time ago. We've got it figured out. He said, no, actually it's getting worse. He said, what we've seen now is that the Corn Belt actually in the last 62 years has moved 163 miles from Springfield, Illinois to Iowa City. Some of that may be based on the fact we're using ethanol and we're driving the market in different directions, but that's a big swing. That's a big move, and we expect that to continue based on climate change and what's going on. So you look at the temperatures that have occurred here, the changes in the last 120 years, and it's not really the 1.6 degrees per century that's a problem. It's the anomaly. See those big spikes that we get now? So that's and you can't really separate temperature from rainfall because they're so closely interacted. And here's the same issue that you observe with the rainfall events, big time rainfall events that we just didn't used to get. 2 inches per century doesn't seem like a lot of water over the course of a year, but it's how it comes to us, the timing and rate. And so we think more now about how do we manage this? We need to manage nutrients. We need to think about yield, but we also need to deal with these big anomalies. And is it getting better? We don't know that it's getting better. You take a look at some of stuff that's going on today, and we never heard about 7-inch rains, 8-inch rains happening in an hour or two. It just wasn't really part of a normal weather pattern that we were used to. So done a lot of great stuff over the years, to develop some wonderful tools and systems that we put in place, but we still haven't got to control the climate yet. We don't think. Maybe if you guys have some extra time, you can work on time travel and X-ray glasses too. Wouldn't hurt. But there's a lot to be done. So think about the climate and think about trying to change the way our climate reacts. You look at NOAA and they'll tell you that if everything stopped today from greenhouse gas emissions, that the temp and the rainfall would continue for decades. And that's a scary thought. It tells us that, yeah, we probably need to spend a lot of time thinking about how we deal not only with climate change, but also if we're truly going to be forced to deal with it for this long, how do we adjust the landscape? How do we go towards adaptation and resilience? So USDA has done a lot of work here. And the bulk of it, from what we've seen, has been based on the atmospheric conditions and how do we sequester carbon, what can we do to reduce N2O and greenhouse gas emissions and take a long-term view. Well, I think that's important. I think we should be doing all those things. And this to me appears to be pretty well thought out, pretty much fully baked, because look at, they've got 33 conservation practice standards they looked at, 81 enhancements, there's 7 mitigation categories. And so they're really driving this train towards things that agriculture can do to try to modify the weather. But go back to that NOAA discussion and say, wow, man, if today we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions, the chart wouldn't even look like this. It wouldn't start to go down immediately. They tell us it would continue to go the wrong direction for a number of decades before it starts going down. I don't know how practical or realistic it is to think that that's going to happen, given some of the worldwide players who are currently creating a lot of emissions. And so if you start to think about what can we do to safeguard our working ag lands and maintain our resilience, I think we ought to spend at least as much time thinking about adaptation as we do mitigation. And so there is a plan for that. USDA has one. It's recent. It was rolled out last fall, and it doesn't appear to be as in-depth or detailed as the atmospheric plan, but it is based on adaptation resilience, and I think that's really important. And so it's got more generalized ideas. We don't have specific practices included here, but I think those are things that we can do to help support agriculture and work with USDA and EPA as we kind of think our way through this whole long-term approach. Sometimes we get tied into thinking short-term, and for some people, 3 to 5 years is a long term, but in this case, it seems like we need to take a 30 to 50 or 100-year view at what's our landscape going to look like, how highly engineered will it be. So we have thought about the first 20 years that we worked with the Conservation Drainage Network and the Ag Drainage Management System Task Force and the Coalition. And so what's the next 20 years going to look like? What will we focus on to try to be as good as stewards as we can, but also mitigate the negative impact of these climate issues and the anomalies that we're forced to deal with? So maybe to think about risks and opportunities, and it's not just ag, it's consumers and downstream neighbors, and it's all the folks in the floodplain and the people who are getting hammered with temperature and water. A big driver for us is from the water business. As we think about peak flow reduction, we think about how we can manage and store water for use. Go back to that chart that shows the yield loss. Too wet, too dry, big deal. We can think about the appropriate conservation practice standards that could fall into the category of adaptation and resilience, and then try to quantify kind of a synergistic approach. What's it look like if we can couple up 2 practices or 3 practices together, like drainage water management, saturated buffers, or wetlands and bioreactors, and how do we get the best use of those resources? Because we're all limited in what we have access to. But then think about new products and the practices we can develop and enhancements to those existing practices. Just recently, relatively recently, we came up with saturated buffers and bioreactors, and the state of Iowa supported those and sponsored the interim standards that went forward. And so now we're seeing more and more of those go in. They're bidding 52 saturated buffers and bioreactors in Iowa tomorrow in one chunk. So that's a step in the right direction, we think. Calculate the ROI. The farmer wants to do the right thing, but can they afford to? I mean, is there an upside here for them beyond just incentives from USDA? We can look at tools for site selection and planning like ACPF. All those things are great. Automate some of the design work can be done. Streamline that process and accelerate adoption. The management plans are critical. We look at things that we can do, like we refer to the DWM, Drainage Water Management RX, a prescriptive approach. And so we're working on developing a tool that will give a producer the ability to simply enter in some site-specific information and generate a year-round management plan that would provide the greatest outcomes for him in agronomic and environmental. Think about simplify and streamline the conservation delivery system and financial options. There's a lot to be done there, and we're working on some of that now and making headway with NRCS and USDA. They're doing some stuff. We're working on some turnkey approaches with cooperative agreements, so we can come in and do site selection, system design, installation, construction inspection oversight, as-built plans go in, and it's a done deal, and the farmer doesn't have to jump through a tremendous amount of hoops. Makes it easier, faster, more affordable for them. So there's a lot that can be done there. And the technologies, just the automation itself. I think we're not going to go out and manually adjust structures on just in the upper Mississippi River Basin alone. 30 million acres in our CS is suitable for these types of practices. And that's before you go to North Carolina or go down to Florida for high value crop areas, this kind of stuff. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there for the technology to be advanced and to be placed on a larger scale this whole thing up. And then, of course, educate, demonstrate, national and international folks. That's what the climate programs call for. And so we think that there's opportunity for all of us to participate in this effort and make a real meaningful difference in the long-term future of agriculture and conservation, and for a tremendous amount of stakeholders. Just the concept of water storage upstream in a watershed for a period of time, whether it's subsurface or surface, to reduce those peak flows that have such a devastating impact on downstream communities. So it's fun stuff. I know you guys are in it all the time. The Nature Conservancy is a wonderful partner. It has been. We work closely with TNC. We actually have a patent developed for swarm intelligence in US and Canada to do system design and methods for managing water levels in a watershed scale with swarm intelligence approach. And TNC was a co-inventor with us on that effort. So appreciate what you do every day and getting out and working with ag. And so we think it's the right thing to be doing. So with that, Lisa and I would certainly entertain any questions or any comments or anything we can do. And if we don't have an answer for you, we can sure try to get one and get back to you. But is there anything you'd like to clarify?
So yes, we do have a question in the chat, Charlie. So from Laura, she says, what are the average costs for an Agri Drain system per acre, and how much phosphorus can be maintained on the field per year?
Average cost, of course, is dependent upon topography. If you have a 40-acre field and you can use one water level control structure and a couple of water gates to back up water in the whole thing, then you're probably talking, even with technical assistance and everything, $300 to $400 an acre. And it's a system that lasts for years and years. The increase in yield itself should pay for it. Plus, there's NRCS dollars available for it. As far as phosphorus is concerned, what we look at with the orthophosphate is around a quarter pound per year per acre is kind of a ballpark. When you think about it, nitrogen, more like 10 to 15 pounds per acre per year. And much of that is just driven off total volume of drainage that is reduced over the course of the year. Does that answer?
Yep, I think that's great. Unless Laura, you have any other, if you have a follow-up for that. We do have another question in the chat from Scott. So the smart drainage systems are great for subsurface drainage systems, which were recently installed with DWM in mind. What would your comments be on implementing smart drainage on land with older drainage systems?
Oftentimes it can be a challenge. You know, we looked at the pancake images and we thought about how it was designed. If it's truly designed absolutely incorrectly for drainage water management, still it's fine for drainage, then oftentimes your ROI won't be as good as you want it to be. It'll be more expensive. And we try to talk people out of doing that, but some people just want to do it anyway. But NRCS says if you can do 10 acres or more on one drainage water management system in a field, you don't have to do the whole field, then they will provide cost share assistance for the design and the installation on that. Oftentimes we'll see these guys too come in and this drainage system may have paid for itself many times over. And they say, I'm just going to replace it. It's random, it's old, it's starting to fail on me anyway. It's undersized based on the rainfall that we get these days, you know, the intensity. And so I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to redesign it and reinstall the whole thing. And so it's very profitable for them. And then they have a long-term solution that'll last them 100 years.
Great, thank you. And then we do have a follow-up question to that from Scott as well. So would retrofitting an existing manual DWM structure to automation be an applicable alternative to total DWM structure replacement?
Absolutely, great question. Sometime back, we developed, I don't know how many years ago, Lisa, probably 5 or 6 years ago, started to build our own valves, our own slide gate valves, because initially we had a larger injection molded PVC valve and we'd have to upsize the structure in order to put, for instance, we'd have to put a structure designed for a 10-inch pipe in order to be able to put an 8-inch slide gate valve in it and up through the line. So if you think about a 12-inch slide gate valve, a 15-inch to 18-inch box was really large. And so now we've redesigned our structure, or our slide gate valves. We made them wider and lower, and we can also stack two on top of each other if we want to go to like a 3-level box. So yes, we can retrofit existing boxes. It's easy. Slide the slide gates out, slide the stop logs out, slide gates in, and hook up your actuator, linear actuator on top, solar panel enclosure, whether it's locally programmable with just a PLC that you just tell it when you want it to open and close. We've got programs for hour of the day of the week, day of the year, or put in a full-blown modem driven unit that is remotely controlled.
Great, thank you. And then it looks like we have one more question comment in the chat. So Thomas says, I think that testing the efficiency of DWM systems under a no-till system versus conventional systems on fields that are some sloping, very erosive, but can do DWM. Thomas, feel free to come off mute if you'd like, and if you have any input on that comment.
Yeah, I'm here. You know, when you start looking at systems approach to these things, drainage is so critical in Southeast Michigan, but I will tell you this, soil erosion is the #1 threat to agriculture, in my opinion. And we quit talking about it, and we don't talk about soil erosion very much. So, you know, all this stuff about drainage and is great, but sometimes it facilitates us to farm fields that are more erosive and contribute. So to me, it's the systems package, and this is where you can come in and get your carbon credits and things. But I really believe that a no-till system will sequester.
Ooh, I think we might have lost you there, Thomas.
Oh, shoot, that's too bad. Thomas is really a leader in this area of conservation and drainage water management. Done a tremendous amount of work out there, and so just a great guy. Is he there now?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I hope you couldn't hear me say that. No, go ahead, sorry.
We lost you, Thomas, right when you were talking about the no-till system. Might be having some connection issues.
Shoot, it's too bad.
Yeah.
I would say that I think it's spot on. I think people are spending way too little time thinking about erosion on these steeper slopes. When you've got something in the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% range, you know, they're taking out terraces. What a shame that is. You see this gully and real erosion on these hills that makes you sick. And that's our productive stuff, man. That's our really good soils. And so as we build these cropping systems that conserve our soil, sequester carbon, we also increase infiltration. And that's a situation, I think, where we really need drainage and drainage water management. We've got one customer says, I grow continuous corn. He said, if I don't have drainage water management, all my water gets away because I've got such a high infiltration rate. It jumps right down in and zips out of the outlet.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for maybe one more question if there's anything outstanding. So if anyone has a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute, but I think we're just about to wrap up here. So I guess with that being said, thank you, Charlie and Lisa for hopping on today. It's very, very appreciated. You guys did a great job, and thank you all for joining. I'll be in touch. We'll send around all the recording of today's meeting, and well, thank you all again. Very appreciated. So if there's anything else, I'll go ahead.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all.